I feel ridiculous asking. 2 to 3 times a year, my husband transforms from this normal, loving, calm person into an absolute rage unit. Punching, screaming, and name-calling. He would never hurt me or the children. I know he feels unheard and frustrated with me, but it causes real mental damage to me. I'm too embarrassed to ask anyone I know, so I'm asking you. Is this something that can happen in normal relationships? Clearly, this isn't normal, but is it common? We've been together for 25 years and married for 17. What is my level of alarm here? Story 1. My level of alarm is this person starts working on themselves, or I am going to have children who think it is okay to throw tantrums as fully grown adults. Story 2. Information. 2 to 3 times a year. Is this a seasonal occurrence? Does he have any mental health conditions? Is he taking any medications? Story 3. I get pretty frustrated. Last night, I was very frustrated. I did not punch or yell. I just asked for 10 minutes to cool down. Story 4. In my first marriage, I punched holes in the walls a few times. I grew up building houses with my dad and also doing a lot of demolition. I knew where to punch the wall and how to fix it 5 minutes later. One day, my ex-wife told me if I did it one more time, she was leaving me. I woke up and never did it again. I did not bring that behavior into my current marriage. Divorce makes you look in the mirror at your own mistakes because the next person is not going to put up with it. Story 5. I have never done this. Anger is normal, but losing control is not. When this happens, it shows that he is unable to handle stress or manage frustrated expectations. He is clearly not calming down with age if this has been occurring for 2 decades. Please encourage him to attend anger management therapy before someone gets hurt. Story 6. When he is calm, tell him you do not want to be afraid of him or to have to teach your children how to learn to regulate their emotions. It is very difficult having to be in survival mode while growing up. Story 7. It's never acceptable to do. However, this is how my father was. I grew up with a dad who never hurt me, but when he was angry, he was vocal and expressive. He never laid a hand on me though. This is something I've struggled with. I yell and get frustrated when I'm angry, and my fiancée takes that as me being upset or angry with her. Often, I'm not. I'm just upset about the circumstances around me. I've been getting better about not being as angry about things that frustrate me, and likewise, she's getting better at not internalizing my anger, especially because 99% of the time it's not about her or something she did. Her feelings are valid, and my feelings are valid. We both try our hardest to work through those moments. If I am in the wrong, it is good to admit it, especially when I am calmer and can walk her through what happened, how it made me feel, and how it wasn't directed at her. Likewise, she can walk me through how my reactions can be interpreted differently from her point of view and how they negatively affected her. Story 8. I have never yelled at my girlfriend or punched things out of anger. I stopped losing my temper like that when I was in high school. He needs anger management therapy. Story 9. I've done it once in my life, but that was because an unexpected side effect of a medication I was starting caused a near-constant state of rage that I couldn't entirely control. Needless to say, that medication was discontinued as soon as I reported the side effect to my neurologist. Story 10. I used to have significant anger issues. Sometimes just the smallest things would set me off. I would rage and destroy things because I didn't understand my emotions or how to deal with them. When I say destroy things, I mean I went through multiple controllers for several different consoles and even wrecked a laptop by slamming it so hard on the desk. Probably cost me thousands of dollars over the years. I didn't start seriously working on it until my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, saw me rage and had a full-on panic attack because it had triggered some deep trauma responses. When I saw how my actions affected her, I resolved to deal with it. I started seeing a therapist and got really into the Stoic school of philosophy. Now I understand that my rage mostly stemmed from my perceived failures and the resulting feelings of shame and fears of rejection, a condition called rejection-sensitive dysphoria. I developed techniques for dealing with my feelings in healthy ways. As a result, my rage attacks have almost entirely gone away, and my mental health and general outlook have significantly improved. All of this is to say your husband's behavior is not normal and you should not tolerate it. It is tantamount to emotional abuse. He is doing real harm to you and your children through those outbursts. It is valid to be frustrated or feel unheard in a relationship. It happens. But the acceptable response is to calmly talk things out, not throw a tantrum. Your husband is teaching your children by example that throwing tantrums as an adult is an acceptable response to frustration in a relationship. This is not okay. You should seek therapy for your entire family, or at least he should go to therapy and you both should do couples counseling. I am not a fan of ultimatums, but this is one scenario where I think it is appropriate to tell him he either gets help and gets his anger under control, or you take the kids and leave. Story 11. Literally never. My father was angry like that, and I have been low contact with my parents for my entire adult life because of it. It was really damaging to my childhood to watch that, even though he never directed his anger at me. We were always walking around on eggshells, and we were too embarrassed to have friends over. Story 12. I have been with my spouse, I am female, for 15 years now. Yes, we have yelled and cried at each other, but he has never hit anything. He does not call me names, is not violent, and does not have a mean streak that comes out when he is frustrated. He needs therapy. Story 13. I have not raised my voice to my wife even once in our 30 years of marriage. We do not fight and never have. We have disagreements and get upset with each other, but have never had an actual yelling match. We talk about everything and addressed all of the important challenges at the beginning of our relationship. As for smashing or damaging your own belongings, that is simply unwise. Story 14. One of the things my then girlfriend told me was that she hated yelling men because they scare her. She was not going to subject herself and her children to a man who made them scared. Your husband might like to read the book How to Control Your Anger Before It Controls You or seek therapy. He needs better ways to deal with his emotions when he is upset. A common subject here on Ask Men is that men should be taught better and be more willing to talk about their emotions, how they feel about them, and how to handle them. Emotional intelligence is important, and one can start learning at any age. Story 15. Never. I don't think I have ever yelled at my wife, and the only time I have punched things in front of her, they were objects designed to be punched or I was play fighting with someone. This is a person who needed to learn how to communicate his feelings a long time ago. It is only going to damage him. Story 16. When my then fiancée first met my mom, one of the questions she asked my mom was, "So, what's he like when he gets angry?" My mom's response was, "He doesn't get angry." Although that's not completely accurate, it is mostly correct. It is quite rare that I get angry or mad, and even in those rare instances, I don't act out in anger and generally don't display it. My husband transforms into an absolute rage unit, punching, screaming, and name-calling. That is immature behavior, the kind of behavior 2-year-old kids exhibit. It is not proper behavior for an adult. What is my level of alarm here? You should be worried. He shouldn't be doing things like that. Screaming, name-calling, punching things in front of you, those are acts of anger and violence and are not acceptable behaviors. The fact that you cannot talk to him about it shows it is a real problem. Of course, there can be disagreements, spirited debates, and maybe even heated moments. But screaming, name-calling, and breaking things are not okay. In my entire adult life, and I am over 60 now, I can only recall 2 occasions where I raised my voice at someone. In both cases, I immediately regretted it, and on one occasion, I apologized right after. The other time was in a relationship that was very troubled anyway, so the best option was to break up, which I did fairly quickly. Story 17. The person feels miserable and expresses it 3 times a year. He needs to be able to process things before they become that severe. Story 18. I can't speak for everyone, but my dad used to do that in his 20s or 30s, so I am guessing it is common for people to crash out like that. However, I strongly suggest he see a professional, as I find this concerning. Everyone is different when they become livid. I just find people who punch and destroy things scary. Story 19. Sounds like my father. Mom was wrong about him not escalating to hitting us. Actually, things escalated to murder attempts. She is still with him. Normal people, regardless of gender, do not act like that. You are describing abuse and violence even if he does not hit you directly so far. The longer you accept it, the harder it will be to get out. There is no fixing that can be done on your part, but the longer you stay, the more this molds your mind. It is a well-studied phenomenon, and this is how people end up beaten and even dead by their partners. I am not judging you. I have been there myself. You need to get out of that marriage. Story 20. I never use name-calling, yell, or do it in front of my family. Whenever I feel that way, I just go outside and kick the dirt or something. Yes, it is still not the proper way to act as an adult. Story 21. Never. I have gotten short-tempered and snippy a few times, but screaming or hitting things is the equivalent of an adult toddler and not a healthy way to manage. Story 22. If there is a pattern of behavior that includes rage, there is an underlying trauma that is not being addressed. He needs to be able to process whatever the trigger is for these outbursts. When he is in a calm state, have a conversation where you explain how this is making you feel and how it is time to address the underlying issue. He needs to have some form of therapy, as it is affecting you and your family, and without proper care and attention will probably escalate. Story 23. I raise my voice to get her attention when she is wearing headphones, but never in anger. As for hitting things, if I feel frustrated, I sometimes go chop wood. It is excellent therapy. Story 24. Arguments with mutual yelling happen maybe once or twice a year. It is regrettable. Punching things never occurs. Yes, it is childish and can be abusive, but I identified it as a form of self-harm when I was a young adult. My children will never see it. Story 25. One time I went into rage mode and smashed a laundry basket in front of my wife. I am not usually like this, but we are only human. Looking back, I realize why it happened. Lack of sleep combined with a lack of control to fix it. In that situation, our neighbor had an air conditioning unit that was not properly installed, and it was audible from our bedroom, preventing me from sleeping. This went on for about a month. Going a whole month without quality sleep will change anyone. I tried everything rational. One night, I could not take it and banged on our neighbor's door in the middle of the night to tell him I could not sleep. We were fortunate that they were reasonable people and they ended up fixing it. Recently, something similar happened. We moved into an apartment that does not have air conditioning, and it gets quite warm at night. I was frustrated again with the neighbors because they smoked a lot, and their cigarette smoke entered our apartment from every opening. Opening the window at night to cool down only brought more smoke in. It was too warm for me to sleep well, and I reacted similarly. None of us are perfect, but what I can tell you is that in both situations I was severely lacking sleep. Maybe you are in a similar situation, lacking sleep. We simply do not act right when we are sleep deprived or lacking something else. It is really hard to identify sometimes, which is why self-reflection helps immensely. I think for me it is not just lack of sleep, but also lack of control to do something about a consistent problem. I used to live in a shared living space, and the neighbor had a barking dog that was audible from most of the building. Luckily, not from my bedroom, so I was able to sleep, but facing this frustration for about 6 months really got to me too. And trust me, in all of these situations I always initially attempted rational solutions. Story 26. I have been with my wife for 28 years. I have never punched anything in front of her, and I do not believe I have ever even yelled at her. I have raised my voice to be heard, but I have never screamed at her. Story 27. My wife and I were having a heated argument in front of our son once. He was a little less than 2 years old at the time, and he started crying and begging us to stop. Now, we cannot raise our voices at each other anymore. Story 28. Very rarely, I have just lost it and yelled a few times in our 23-year marriage. Once at her and a few more times at the world in general, but not in her presence. I can count the times on one hand, and I deeply regret all of them. It has been over a decade since the last time, which I have vowed will truly be the last. He needs to get a handle on this, and it is definitely okay for you to tell him that this is not acceptable. Story 29. Never. I am a 39-year-old male, and I have never done that to my wife. That sort of behavior is not going to improve. It will only get worse. Story 30. I have been with my partner for 8 years and not once have I lost control. I have definitely snapped at her a few times and felt bad about it, as she has some childhood trauma with abusive parents, and I do not want to bring that to the surface. Those moments were angry but not rage. I still get mad and angry. It is natural. However, I know I need to give myself space to process my feelings and let them flow out. I want her to feel safe, and I want my children to see their parents as a rock-solid foundation in their lives. In my early 20s with my former wife, I certainly yelled occasionally and slammed doors. I was young, not centered, and we were not a good fit. We rushed into marriage, and money was always a stressful issue. Story 31. I understand getting upset. We all get mad every once in a while. However, turning into an intense rage while punching something, screaming, and insulting someone is not normal or common. That person needs therapy. Story 32. Never, I would look up the violence meter. It is a good tool to see when a relationship becomes abusive. Story 33. Only when I was tenderizing the piece of protein I was about to cook, I couldn't hear her. I can't think of any other scenario where that would be appropriate. Story 34. I am a man, but I do not have a wife. I have been in 5 or 6 relationships so far. I have never hit anyone. I may have raised my voice when I was very upset, but I usually try to keep things calm and discuss them. Sometimes I get emotional and cry, but I have never hit or shouted at anyone I have dated. I have raised my voice, but I have not shouted. There is a big difference. Story 35. I have never behaved like this toward my wife or in front of my children. Actually, I cannot remember being emotionally out of control like this since I was a teenager. Story 36. Just to rule out medical issues. Get his blood sugars tested, including hemoglobin A1C, and rule out diabetes. Also, he may be depressed. Story 37. Yelled as in raised voices? A handful of times. Yelled as in yelling like I want to hurt someone? Never. Physically hit anything in front of or around her? Never. Story 38. Never. Never ever. First, she would punch me back. Second, we do not yell at each other. We have been together for over 20 years. Story 39. My husband of 3 years, together almost 6, used to have what we called episodes about 2 to 3 times a year. During these episodes, he would freak out, become completely unable to respond to reason, and throw and break things. He once threw a phone at me and hit my chest. I began by suggesting he go to therapy and eventually told him his behavior was becoming a deal breaker. Therapy helped him start communicating his feelings when things happened instead of holding it all in until it exploded. Many men are socialized to hold in their emotions and be strong, but that is not true. I strongly urge you to get him into therapy with a good therapist. Story 40. As someone whose father did exactly what you are describing, I can assure you the children already feel hurt. Being screamed at, yelled at, and hit in my presence was its own form of abuse. Story 41. I have never once done any of those things with my partner of 2 years. There were times I felt close to that level in toxic relationships. What you describe is not uncommon, but it is not normal and should not be treated as such. If the behavior has been consistent without escalating for 25 years, I do not think you are in immediate danger of escalation. However, it is causing you harm, which is more than enough reason to insist that this be taken seriously. It is also not good for him to get so angry without healthier ways to manage his strong emotions. It is a sign of suffering as well as a cause of it. Some therapy could do him some good. Story 42. Never. Sure, we argue and it can get heated. That is normal. But yelling and punching things are a big red flag. It is not common, not your fault, and unfortunately, if he gets so mad he punches the wall, sooner or later you become the wall. Story 43. Never, in 10 years together and 14 years of knowing her, have I ever yelled at her. That does not mean we do not have arguments, but we prefer not to raise our voices or be aggressive purely out of respect. Sometimes we take some time to calm down before discussing things. The last time I yelled at a partner was when I was 16. Story 44. Never yelled at my wife, never insulted her, never disrespected her. Never punched things in front of her. Why would I? I love her. We have been together since 1997. Story 45. I never do that, but my wife does the equivalent female version when she gets overwhelmed and might have premenstrual syndrome. Then she starts losing it on the kids. I step in when she crosses the line. After that, she unloads on me and threatens to break up. 2 days later, she acts like nothing happened. My 7-year-old son does kind of the same. It could be something called emotional dysregulation connected to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But we don't know. This is Reddit. I am the cool-headed one in my house. She loses her temper occasionally. No punching walls though, just trying to hurt me with words. Good luck with that. Story 46. I don't do that. Married 34 years. I've lost my cool and so has she, but it sounds like he is raging. Talk to him. You've been married a long time, and something is wrong that he's struggling to process. His behavior isn't okay, but he is probably out of his depth with something. Ask yourself what is different in your relationship now compared to a few years ago. Story 47. Never behave like that, especially in the presence of my family. Acting out in that way is equivalent to a threat. Story 48. He cannot treat you like that. Among other things, loving someone means you must change your behavior if you are making them scared of you. Story 49. Honestly, never. I might get frustrated, but I cannot say I have ever been angry in the sense that I want to punch things or even scream and yell. I occasionally get snippy and raise my voice a bit to tell someone to back off or pay attention, and I always have a gradual build-up to even that point. What you describe is probably a problem that requires some professional assistance. Story 50. Literally never, but I do know 1 or 2 cases where this happens occasionally. In one of them, both individuals are serious alcoholics, so it does not count. Story 51. We raise our voices at each other sometimes if we are angry. It never escalates to physical threats or displays of violence. Ever. Story 52. Never. I have other healthy ways of processing and communicating my emotions. You will never catch me doing this. Story 53. Maybe I don't have a normal relationship, but my husband and I do not do that type of thing whatsoever. We have been together 11 years now, and there has not been a single instance where anything has ever been punched or thrown at the walls in the house or at each other. I guess in my not-so-normal relationship, I find that it is absolutely peaceful. We might get into an argument every once in a while, but the minute we realize that we are arguing and our voices are getting raised, one of us will look at the other and say, I hear you perfectly fine, so you can just tone it down a little. Then there is a pause in the conversation, an adjustment is made to the volume, and we look at each other and continue a civil conversation. I am sorry that you are experiencing this, and I hope this is not considered normal in a relationship or marriage. If so, I will take my not-so-normal marriage any day. Story 54. My parents were married for 32 years before we lost my mother to cancer. I never once heard my father raise his voice, saw him punch anything, or even get anything beyond stern. Not once. Dad was and still is, 20 years after her passing, madly in love with my mother. They were equal and dedicated partners, an inseparable team who loved and respected each other. I am a transgender man, and I do not exaggerate when I say my father is exactly the kind of man I try to be. The normal number of times to express anger by yelling at your partner or hitting something, be it a wall or a person, is 0. Please get your husband to therapy. Frame it as concern that he could injure himself if you have to, but get him to therapy. Bottling up his emotions until he has a massive eruption multiple times a year like this is not only unhealthy for him, it is also unfair to you, your children, and your drywall. Story 55. I've only yelled at my wife a couple of times in our whole relationship, and we have been together for 12 years. I never call her names, and I do not punch things out of anger, whether she is there or not. Story 56. I have been married to my wife for nearly 4 years. We dated for 5 years before getting married. I have never yelled at her. Story 57. I got over that when I got over my teenage years. You are married to a grown man who behaves like a teenager. It is one thing to get frustrated or angry, but it is another to not channel it into better things. Story 58. 0 times in over 13 years he needs therapy of some sort. He is not a teenager based on how long you have been together, so he needs to quit acting like his frontal lobe is not fully developed. Story 59. Please recommend a therapist to him. By recommend, I mean telling him he is doing it. I believe you when you say he is a good person, but sometimes even the best people fail miserably at controlling and regulating their emotions because of unaddressed mental health issues such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or other conditions. I know this because it was me. I was this person. I am a calm, loving, and outgoing person and would never hurt anyone. However, my temper involved yelling, screaming, and throwing things, but I would also hurt myself. Over what? The smallest things. Why? Because I had an undiagnosed mental health issue and could not cope with or regulate my emotions. What he is doing is not good, but the real problem will lie in whether or not he acknowledges that there is an issue and his willingness to address it appropriately. Story 60. I had a difficult phase with drinking and anger involving my girlfriend, who was focused on her career and admittedly not prioritizing me. During this time, I lashed out, yelled, and acted immaturely. It was unhealthy, so I attended therapy monthly for years and continue to have quarterly check-ins because of issues with drinking, anger, anxiety, and depression. Many people say bluntly that this behavior is terrible, and it is, but I don't think I am a complete failure. If he is willing to work on it, then maybe ask him to do so. Story 61. Together for 13 years and married for 9. I have never yelled at my wife, nor have I punched things out of rage. Obviously, we have had arguments where our voices were raised, but that is different from yelling at someone. This is not normal and it is abuse. Story 62. I used to have anger issues as a child, to the point where I would throw and break things when I got angry. I mellowed out in high school, probably due to puberty. I also found healthy outlets for stress like going to the gym. Now, it takes a lot to make me that angry again. I have known my wife for about 7 years, and not once have I ever freaked out about anything or hid anything. I can be angry, but I express my anger with respectful words. My wife and I talk through everything, and in the 7 years we have known each other, I have been angry only twice. If someone resorts to breaking things, I would say that is a significant red flag. Story 63. Never. That behavior is wild, and it is even more concerning that people say this is acceptable once or twice a year. We do not argue, we do not fight, we do not even bicker, and we have never raised our voices at each other. Story 64. It is not normal, despite how common it is for men to do this. If I were in your position, I would recommend therapy to help address whatever is building under the surface that erupts 2 to 3 times a year. It makes sense that it causes you mental distress, and I am sorry you are experiencing that. Story 65. Never. I am not psychotic or a child with no control over my emotional responses, and being louder does not make me more right or less frustrated. That kind of behavior is absolutely contemptible and deeply shameful from an adult. It is not normal and should not be treated as acceptable. Story 66. The closest I got to that in my 30 years of life was throwing a teabag really hard at the kitchen wall when no one was around and also screaming into a pillow out of frustration. So never. My ex-fiancé used to throw things all the time, and I am very conscious of the effect that has on your partner's mental well-being. Edit. It sounds to me that his frustration builds up over the year, and then once in a while it becomes too much to hold in, so it erupts in relatively uncontrollable bursts. Story 67. I have shouted during an argument once or twice, but it takes a great deal to make me yell at the woman I love. In 22 years, I can count the times on one hand. A therapist is what your partner needs. Story 68. I used to do it a lot, but haven't done so in years. I realized that often the fault was with me, and even when it wasn't, my behavior was unacceptable. It helped me control my emotions when it happens. I still get mad, but I manage to control myself better now. Story 69. I was about 23 and a bit drunk when I got into an argument with my ex-girlfriend. She stormed off, so I didn't see it, but I punched a wall in frustration. Turned out to be concrete. I was drunk enough and hopped up on adrenaline that I barely felt it. I woke up in agony the next day and iced it for 3 days with no improvement. Turned out I broke my hand in my act of stupidity. I never once hit her or any woman and have since learned my lesson not to be so reckless. I would never do that again. I can't believe your husband does this regularly throughout the year. He really should seek therapy and learn to control his emotions. That is the best thing I ever did. Story 70. It is common but not normal. As a man, I get angry, of course, but I am not a child or teenager to lack control of my emotions. My father is an amazing man, but he is the type you are describing, and it made me miserable as a child and caused many mental health issues. The home should be a peaceful place. No one is supposed to scream or verbally attack their loved ones. Story 71. Punching, screaming, and name-calling. Punching is dangerous. Name-calling can also be very harmful depending on what is being said. If he is feeling unheard and frustrated, and this is genuinely the case, not an excuse or result of manipulation, then you need to address it. Both of you need to sit down and talk about the issues between you. You should both see therapists, likely both separately and as a couple. The reality is that violence against objects and violence against people are closely related. If you don't address this together, one day the fist may be directed at you instead of the wall. If you don't feel safe or comfortable addressing this with him, then you need to leave. Story 72. Never happened. I have been mad at her for sure, but even in the worst of times, I never called her names or punched something out of anger. This is not normal. Story 73. My ex-husband did this all the time, probably as often as yours. I eventually left. There were other issues too, but that was a big one. It got much worse. I have an order of protection, and he has been in and out of jail for violating it and threatening to kill me. To me, the behavior is deeply concerning and can quickly escalate. I would venture to say you probably placate him when he gets in those moods to stop the violence, but when the time comes that you don't, it escalates. Story 74. Depression in men often presents as irrational anger. This was my problem and resulted in me getting verbally confrontational with my wife on occasion, just irrational anger out of nowhere. I also once punched a wall because our infant child would not stop crying. She was never at risk. If I was getting frustrated, I carefully set her down and walked away. It was during a command training for the Navy where they were discussing suicide prevention. They had a presentation slide with about 15 different symptoms of depression. I remember looking at them, ticking off what applied to me, and thinking, that makes sense. Now I am on antidepressants, and it has resolved many of my issues. Working to generally improve communication with my wife has also helped. Story 75. My ex-husband had his moments of childish tantrums. He was never aggressive with me or the children but would hit things. I still have his fist imprint on the front of my refrigerator. I highly recommend counseling if you are struggling with communication. It will not get better on its own, and clearly what you are doing is not working. Story 76. Hey, original poster. This might be a good read for you. Story 77. We have been married for 10 years and together for 16. I punched through a wall once because I was on depression medication that was making my mood worse, and I was in a horrible place in my life. I am lucky my wife did not leave me. She would have been within her rights to do so. What you are describing is not healthy. This person needs psychological help. Story 78. I rarely yell and never get destructive around my wife, nor when I am by myself. Neither should your husband. You should be able to have disagreements and get angry without resorting to yelling in 90% of instances and just have a conversation like an adult. Story 79. I have gotten into a few screaming matches with my wife through the years and walked away muttering bad things under my breath as I get in my car for a 20-minute rage drive. But I could never imagine punching a hole in the wall or smashing glasses. Story 80. I have been married for 18 years. I have never punched anything, and this sounds like abuse. You say he would never hurt you or your children, and I hope you are right. However, this is obviously hurting you psychologically and emotionally. I recommend seeking counseling right away. If he refuses, I suggest ending the relationship. It is easy for me to say, but you do not deserve such horrible treatment. Good luck. Story 81. Never. The most I ever did was toss a packet of ramen in the other direction, and even that made me feel guilty. Understanding the displays of that nature just intimidate, which is not what I wanted to do. It was a situation of raw frustration, and I could have managed my emotions better or taken a break. It is unhealthy and requires talking about. Story 82. Never. It is not okay. But keep in mind it is his trauma you are dealing with, not him. Both of you need to approach it that way. Story 83. Why is he angry? You mentioned unheard feelings. Does this have something to do with you or with the general world? Story 84. As a man, if I rage, it means I go silent and distract myself with other things until I calm down enough to have a productive conversation. Usually, a nice game of tennis helps me return to my normal state. Story 85. It is a concern from my perspective that he does not have a handle on his emotions. If he was taking himself to a boxing gym or something, I would understand because the frustration is real. However, not having control over when that frustration emerges is a problem. I think there is an interesting question about the pattern and events around these moments. Do they always follow an extended period of do-it-yourself activities? Is it only after weeks of him trying to explain something that is bothering him at work, but the household chores just keep accumulating? None of these make it okay, but they do provide insight into why the events manifest and why he may not be controlling when they appear. Story 86. Basically never. Once every year or two, my wife and I may get into an argument that escalates to yelling, but we never name-call, punch things, or get physical. Story 87. I used to have anger management issues, but I never made my wife the target of that anger. Even in my first marriage, when we were going through our divorce, there was no name-calling or directing anger at her, and definitely not at the kids. I ended up having undiagnosed anxiety issues. I started a daily dose of venlafaxine and have not had an issue since. Obviously, I still get annoyed from time to time, but the feeling of frustration welling up inside me that overwhelmed my normal thoughts is gone entirely. The takeaway from this is to talk to a professional. Imbalanced brain chemistry can make us all act outside our normal character. Story 88. I do martial arts and have been practicing for the last 30 years, so I have that need covered. I have never yelled at my wife or punched a wall or any other inanimate object in front of her out of frustration. I have been married with children for the last 10 years. Story 89. I have been with my wife since 2010. We have raised our voices at each other on very rare occasions, which is normal, but I have never once felt the need or urge to physically destroy things because I can control my anger. Story 90. Never. My husband has never done any of that. And yes, he gets upset, but he handles it like an adult. He would never scare the children, hurt me, or call me names. Do not make excuses for him. That is not acceptable behavior from anyone, no matter how mad or stressed. My husband has never punched anything. He will go play a video game, start cleaning, or do yard work to calm down and think. We talk. We do not argue, we discuss. If someone got in his face to argue, yell, or call him names, he would just turn around and leave. It is not worth it for him to deal with people like that. They are not worth his time. He is definitely a classy man. Please know it is not normal to walk on eggshells around anyone. You are showing your children what acceptable behavior is. You do not want them growing up acting like that or allowing that to happen to them. Story 91. Have you noticed that it has become more frequent? I would recommend scheduling an MRI and a consultation with an endocrinologist. You might be experiencing a possible tumor or significant fluctuations in hormones. Story 92. Literally never, because I am a well-adjusted adult capable of self-regulating my emotions. I do not shout or raise my voice either, even during an argument. It is really not hard to be civilized, even in moments of conflict. Story 93. Very high level of alarm. I have never yelled at my wife, never hit or broken anything in anger, not once in our 20 years together. My dad has, though. He has rage fits stemming from post-traumatic stress disorder and neurological disorders. He has broken his hand multiple times punching walls. He has never laid a hand on any of us, and he has gotten better with professional intervention, but it is still terrifying. Seek help. You should not have to live in fear. Story 94. I am not a man, but I can say my husband has never once yelled at me or even around me. He has never punched, kicked, or hit anything. He has never thrown anything either. Story 95. Never. At one point, I was a person who put holes in walls because I could not control my anger. Then I grew up and realized how wrong that behavior was. It is always, they would never hurt me or the children. Then it is always, he was really upset, he did not mean to, he will never do it again. Then you are walking on eggshells because you are terrified the slightest thing will set him off. Sure, he could be the exception. We all want our loved ones to be the exception, but they rarely are. Story 96. About 10 years ago, I got angry enough one time to slam things around, and I saw the terror in my wife's face, which stopped me immediately. My father had an anger problem when I was growing up, and I still have emotional scars from it well into my 40s. I immediately knew the fear she felt, and I would not want anyone to ever feel how I felt as a child. I never want my wife to be afraid of me, and to this day, I have not done it again. Story 97. Not even once in 42 years. How often do you yell at your husband, throw things and break glassware in front of him? Never? Yes, that should be the answer. Story 98. Never. Ever. Not even once. If you ask the same question in Ask Women, they will recommend this book. The Gift of Fear. The fact that you are not scared worries me. It suggests that you have seen or experienced this before and consider it normal. It is not normal. Story 99. It is hard to get an actual answer from this subreddit because the only experience a man will have in a heterosexual relationship is that of his own. So they are either going to say they do not get mad and it is not normal, or they get mad and it is normal. It is better to ask a women's subreddit. You will get a clearer answer more likely. As for my experience, I used to be the one who raged, punched things, and screamed not at her but in general. After years of managing my emotions, I no longer hit things or scream. I still have anger outbursts, but there is no screaming. The rage is always directed at something rather than someone. I cannot say what your husband's emotions or limits are, and I do not think anybody here can. This is something you can try to work on together or encourage him to seek assistance. Random people on the internet are not going to be able to change anything. Story 100. Yell at my wife? Never. The only time she has seen me frustrated or angry is when I am working and something is not working or someone makes a mistake. The anger is never directed at her. I am just expressing frustration aloud. She finds it amusing since I do not get violent. I just say things, and when she speaks to me, I immediately calm down. She is my best friend, and I love her. Story 101. I used to yell at my wife. Only once before we were married. I was angry and threw a trash can. A therapist I respect told me, "You cannot yell at your wife." Honestly, I had no idea this behavior risked divorce. I grew up in a loud half-Italian home. I listened to the therapist. Full stop. No more yelling. Ever. Apparently, it has been explained to me that stopping this behavior is extremely difficult. About 1 out of 100 people can stop. I understood that my options were clear. Yelling equals divorce. Not yelling gave me a chance to keep our family together. I chose not to yell. We are better than ever before. Story 102. You should be very alarmed. The only time I raise my voice to my wife is when she is too far away to hear a normal speaking voice. The only things I punch in front of her are gym equipment. That is how it should be. Story 103. Woman here and my husband, who I have been with since I was 17, we are now 30, has never acted that way. Story 104. He is doing it in response to being angry with you? That is a yikes. I will lose my temper and throw a little fit about twice a year, but it is always at an object. For example, when I am trying to build something and everything is going wrong and I am in a rush or otherwise frustrated. Usually I do something silly like kick a board or throw a hammer on the ground. Just one quick childish outburst and I am once again calm with inanimate objects. It is never about human conflict though, especially not my family. I do not know what your dynamics are like, and it is hard to say what is normal for you. Some couples scream at each other so much that it becomes routine. That does not mean it is fine. If it is a two-way street, it is bad no matter what. If aggressive emotional outbursts are frequent and mutual, then the person hitting the wall while yelling is not in a different category of bad compared to just yelling. Either way, not being able to control raging at your partner is a problem. There is no excuse for it. It is not acceptable to say it only happens a few times a year and he is otherwise in control. If you cannot trust him to be in control, it changes your relationship because you are always worried about setting him off. Even if he only has an outburst 5% of the time, you are walking on eggshells 100% of the time, and that is bad. You have said how it affects you. If that is not enough to keep him from raging, then he needs counseling. Story 105. I have been married about as long as you have. I have never yelled at or belittled my wife, nor have I hit her or the wall. Story 106. I might give her some sass back, but we never yell or argue. Certainly no fighting. It sounds like he needs some self-discipline. Story 107. The worst thing I have ever done is snap at my partner if I am stressed about something. I always feel awful immediately afterward and apologize. I have never raised my voice at her, let alone screamed, name-called, or punched something. Story 108. Never punched anything. We have raised our voices but not fully yelled about anything, and even then, it was not directed at the person. Story 109. I have raised my voice during a disagreement and used some profanity, but never any name-calling or physical violence. That is unreasonable. If anyone made me that angry, especially multiple times a year, I would just leave. That applies to friends, romantic partners, and workplaces. I do not understand why either of you stay if serious fights are so common. Story 110. 0 times in 10 years. I have never been mad at my wife. I have been mad around my wife. I have been mad in situations where she is present. I have never been mad at her. That being said, I have punched people in front of my wife, but not because of her. She just happened to be there. Does that count? Story 111. My partner has yelled at me once in 10 years, instantly apologized, and has not done it again. They have never hit anything. That is not normal behavior. Story 112. My husband has yelled at me a few times during stressful periods, for example, when he was selling his condominium and buying our house. However, he was told that this behavior was not acceptable to me and has not occurred in years. Story 113. Never to both. If my wife ever makes me angry, I will go quiet and tell her that I just need to cool off. Then I will be good to talk. I do not think I could ever raise my voice at my wife, honestly. Punching things is a really concerning way to express or release anger. None of that behavior is normal. Story 114. I had never done this until one particular relationship. I smashed a few things around the house but never laid a hand on her or our child. It was definitely frustration from not being heard. I don't even know if there is a name for what I experienced. It felt like having a conversation, then trying to hypnotize me by avoiding the point I was making, invalidated by simply ignoring my point, continuing the conversation without acknowledging it, and passively repeating her point over and over. We split. I did therapy and continue to work on myself. It was complete frustration from lack of expression or finding a way to break through that led me to resort to some physical outlet, as unhealthy as that was. Story 115. Sounds like he never learned to control his emotions or express them in time and at a pace so they do not build up and explode. This is an issue with many men. It is a direct result of the whole manly man era and ideas like only girls cry. Combine that with beliefs such as only weirdos go to the therapist, and you have a very unpredictable and problematic time bomb. The worst part is he does not even realize it himself. His subconscious learned to cope this way. This is not healthy. It will damage your relationship and create distance between him and his loved ones. Support him and encourage him to seek help from a professional. Story 116. I'm never showing anger around loved ones. To get me to that point would require serious effort in pushing buttons. I walk away, think things through, and then apologize. I never leave the house angry or go to bed angry. I don't care what the disagreement was about. I will apologize for my part in it regardless. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.